For the Denver Broncos, I initially sat here last offseason. They seem to have finally resolved their quarterback problems ever since Peyton Manning retired in 2016. 6 years, ladies and gentlemen, 6 years of quarterback problems. You had Paxton Lynch, Trevor Siemian, Case Keenum, Teddy Bridgewater. You can name them all. All the quarterbacks that have started since Peyton Manning retired after Super Bowl 50. It's a long laundry list. Denver seemed to have finally resolved that quarterback problem last offseason, making that big, massive trade to go and get Russell Wilson from the Seattle Seahawks. And yeah, it was a large chunk of change to get Russell Wilson in that big trade. And then, of course, they also made the big move to go and get and hire Nathaniel Hackett as their new head coach. Nathaniel Hackett being a former offensive coordinator for the Green Bay Packers. And, it seemed like the Broncos were finally going to make some noise in the AFC West. But then the actual season came around. And then, all I can say about that, it can be summed up in basically 7 words. Yeah, just 7 simple words of how their season went. Wilson's play was pretty much horrible. He was unable to move the ball all around, but also at the same time, a good part of that was thanks to the god-awful coaching from Nathaniel Hackett. He looked well in over his head, and he wasn't even fired well before the season ended. He was fired the day after Christmas. Yeah, literally a Christmas parting gift from the Denver Broncos, the new Walmart ownership group, by the way. So the Denver Broncos stumbled to a 5-12 record in 2022. Yeah, not exactly a good first year if you're Russell Wilson going into a new team. So obviously your goal for 2023 is to have a bounce back year if you're Russell Wilson. Not just for Russell Wilson, mind you. It's for the entire Denver Broncos team that really didn't have itself a good year aside from the defense. The defense was probably the positive of that Denver team in last year in 2022. So how are you going to get back to that point? How are you going to get to rebounding this coming fall? So they made another big move in this past offseason, like when we got to January, I believe, when they made that move. So they made another trade, as if they didn't make enough trades last offseason. So they made another big trade in the form of head coach. So they had to go find a head coach, obviously, because they fired Nathaniel Hackett before Christmas. And then that coach came in the form of former New Orleans Saints head coach Sean Payton. I say former, even though he was still technically tied to the team because they let him go. They let him resign when he still had a little bit of his contract left. But nonetheless, the Broncos traded for Sean Payton for a good number of first and second round picks, including this year's. It's like, man, they really want to give away all these first round picks just like the Rams, huh? So anyway, I digress. They take away Sean Payton from the Fox Sports Studio show, and now they're getting him back into the coaching game. But of course, it came at the cost of first and second round picks. So it's another big question. It's like, Sean Payton's been away for coaching for I think about a year or two, and aside from the Super Bowl he won back in 2010, it's like, yeah, you're doing. He did some solid things in New Orleans, but at the same time, not a whole lot of good either. Again, this is my casual opinion of that. So you get Sean Payton. Now you're expecting a rebound season for Russell Wilson, but there's obviously some more work to do besides that. You had to, as I noted down in my team needs in my season recap for the Denver Broncos, you had to retool the offensive line because it was not good. One of the key things of why Russell Wilson also struggled was not just his play, but the offensive line did not protect him that well. I take back what I said in my season recaps. Like, there were times that they did okay, but for the most part, yeah, it wasn't. Looking back at it, it's like, man, I was wrong about that. So I'll admit when I'm wrong. I was like, they definitely did not do that great. They also needed some depth behind running back Javonte Williams, because keep in mind he did get injured early in the season with the torn ACL. So they definitely could have used some depth and another edge rusher on the defensive line, because once you lose Randy Gregory and the other players, yeah, there wasn't really a lot of room to grow there, especially late in the season with all those injuries piling up. So looking at some of their offseason moves, they did re-sign safety Kareem Jackson, so a key part of that secondary, and linebacker Alex Singleton, a key part of that pass rush, so that was good. They did lose, honestly, not a whole lot, so that's always a good thing if you're Denver. They lost defensive tackle Jamont Jones to the Seattle Seahawks. I mean, he was okay. Tackle Billy Turner to the New York Jets. Not a crucial loss if you're Denver. And this was a little bit of a surprising one, though. Kicker Brandon McManus, they released him. Not sure why they did that. He was kind of reliable for them. Maybe he struggled for them. I don't know. Cap reasons. Either way, now Denver has to rely on an undrafted from last year and an unproven Elliott Fry from their practice squad. A little weird, kind of, in my opinion. So you look at their free agency moves, obviously, is to rebuild around Russell Wilson and give him some support, especially up front. So they got the likes of Mike McGlinchey from the 49ers. Yeah, you all remember Mike McGlinchey, my Niners fans. And then the interior, they got a guard in Ben Powers from the Baltimore Ravens. Some solid moves in the interior. And then on the defensive side, you got an edge rusher in Zach Allen from the Arizona Cardinals. So definitely a big help for Randy Gregory. And then they also, going back on the offensive side, backup running back Samaje Perine from the Bengals. And then going to the draft, they get a receiver by the name of Marvin Mims from Oklahoma. Linebacker Drew Sanders from Alabama. I liked him when I scouted him, in air quotes. Corner Riley Moss from Iowa. Linebacker J.L. Skinner from Boise State. And center Alex Forsythe from Oregon. So when I look at Denver's offseason, obviously the big highlight was getting Sean Payton, despite the high cost to get him in terms of their draft capital. They got the head coach they wanted. At the price of stocking up. So, you can't really complain of how much Denver gave away for getting Sean Payton. It comes at the risk of how well he's going to do with that team, and how much he's going to kind of prove at that point, and how well he's going to mesh with Russell Wilson. But at least with Sean Payton, he brings experience and a better offensive scheme than Nathaniel Hackett did, because as I said, he was clearly in over his head, trying to be a head coach, and in certain situations from week one, from then on. And then it seems like the offensive line is going to be better, at least on paper. Ben Powers is a really good interior blocker in the passing game. Good work up on the running game, though. Mike McGlinchey is good on the right edge as well, but Denver better be wary when he starts committing some holding penalties. But yeah, Niners fans certainly know that very well. And then you have left tackle Garrett Bowles returning from injury, and then you have center Lloyd Cushenberry coming back as well. Denver's offensive line, could be pretty X-factor strong wall, as long as they stay healthy and disciplined. So looking at some of their key games of 2023, you have your very first game in week 1 against the Raiders. You don't know how they're going to be. You don't know if they're going to be good or worse. You don't even know if they're going to be starting Jimmy Garoppolo in week 1, but a good opportunity to get a first win. One of your first wins against the Raiders since a long ass time. And then you have to go down to Miami to play the Dolphins, Tua Tagovailoa, and that very strong crew in week 3. And then your big test comes in week 6 and 8. You have to play the Chiefs every other week. First on the road and then at home. So a big test in 2 of 3 weeks. And then after your bye week, you go to Buffalo to take on the Bills. Yeah, very strong slate in the first half of the season. And a kind of difficult one in the strong AFC if you're Denver. So obviously the biggest questions that I have for the Denver Broncos going into 2023 centers around Russell Wilson and Sean Payton. How is Sean Payton going to do? How is he going to mesh well with Russell Wilson, who needs to rebound with Sean Payton and these new additions to the offense? Certainly Russell Wilson has an opportunity to right the wrong from last season. He clearly struggled, But now he has a proven head coach and better, or at least on paper, upfront protection alongside the already good receiving options. That is Jerry Jeudy, Cortland Sutton, and rookie tight end that honestly did pretty decent, Greg Dulcich, as well as you got new receiver Marvin Mims. So basically, there's practically no excuse for Russell Wilson to have another down year unless, injury, like you have a freaking injury mania running wild in the mile high. And then the next question is centered around the running back spot. Javonte Williams is coming back from a torn ACL, so it's probably interesting to see how Sean Payton and their offensive coordinator Joe Lombardi handle that. How soon are they going to ease him back in? If he's going to be fully healthy by week 1. If he's not going to be healthy by week 1, perhaps they give Samaje Perine, who did pretty decent, pretty solid with some starter reps in Cincinnati, handle some heavier loads first. So perhaps they let him do that. So for Denver, I expect the Broncos to at least bounce back from last year's big-time disaster, barring any injury mania in Denver. The problem is, even though with the middle-of-the-road schedule, they still in a tightly contested AFC West. You still have Patrick Mahomes. You still have Justin Herbert to deal with. You still have a Raiders team that, even though they still have questions about whether or not Jimmy Garoppolo is going to play or whoever's going to be under center, you don't know about Josh Jacobs. They have to deal with the likes of Josh Allen and Aaron Rodgers in the AFC as well. Even with that middle of the pack schedule, there's still a lot of issues within the AFC. So they may snag a couple of easy wins and maybe some select upsets. Who knows? It might not be enough, considering how competitive both the AFC and their own division may be. It's going to be a little difficult for Denver to climb the ladder in this AFC. I do think they will have a winning record. Just might not be enough to make the postseason. I give them 9-8. 9-8 is a generous spot for them to be in.